Hi there, students. I'm XS. That's little x, little s, which stands for extra sweet, because that's what I am. Happy DOGtober! I'm so excited for everything that I have planned for this month. Here's a brief rundown. Spooky words of the day all month long. Spooky lesson theming. They'll still be my normal lessons, but just with a bit of a spooky twist. A spooky announcement coming toward the end of the month. And spooky games on Twitch. All month long, I'm going to play exclusively scary games. Jump scares, ghosts, Dead by Daylight collabs, maybe some Faz? It's going to be a great time. Dang, I already missed Fallout London though. One more note too. I just want to say that I really appreciate everyone's patience with my decision to revamp my first lesson last week instead of uploading a new video. I've got a lot going on. For those of you who don't know, in addition to the work that I'm doing on my channel, I'm also a full-time translator. So, yeah, I'm a busy pupper. But I'm also a happy pupper. Nothing brings me more joy than just being able to put out awesome content for all of you lovely students, and it's my most profound wish that you're enjoying what you see. I'm also going to redo a couple more of the early lessons that had audio quality issues, but I'm going to put that off just a little bit. We'll get it done at some point. Anyway, why don't we start today's lesson? Let's get into it. Ikimashou! Boo! Did I scare you? I'm a scary puppy. So scare. Could excess stand for extra scary? I'll never tell. Students, have I made it clear to you how much I love vampires? I really enjoy them. So, let's learn how to say the sentence, there is a vampire outside. That's a very important sentence to know how to say, and honestly, I think we should learn it in every language. Anyway, here it is. Soto ni kyuketsuki ga imasu. Alright, so I'm being a little playful with spooky season, but actually I think there's a lot in this sentence that will be really great for us to learn. Let's go through it piece by piece. Soto. This word means outside. The opposite, inside, would be uchi. Uchi and soto, inside and outside, are kind of pillars of Japanese society. Very, very important concepts. These two words can be spatial, such as indoors versus outside, but they can also be deeply metaphorical. For example, your uchi spaces are those spaces that are very close to you, your family, your close friends, while your soto spaces include strangers on the train or people who are in positions of great authority. Your uchi space is actually so important that you can use that same word to mean your home or even yourself. In the case of this sentence, we're using soto simply to mean outside. Maybe you're in bed and you look out your window and you see a vampire floating there, quite literally outside your room. Huh, it's kind of a dream of mine. Anyway, there we'll use soto. Okay? Next is ni. Now, we've actually seen ni before. It's a locative particle. It locates something within space. Don't confuse it with e. E is a directional particle. E is used when you're talking about moving through space, traveling from here to there. But ni is stating that something is happening in a place. So I guess you can remember that ni is in. Kyuketsuki. Sometimes Japanese words are so cool in my opinion. What is a vampire in Japanese? It's an inhale blood demon. The first kanji in kyuketsuki means to suck. It's literally the same kanji that's used for smoking a cigarette, to suck in. The second kanji is ketsu, which means blood. And then finally we have ki. When in isolation, ki will be pronounced oni. That should give you an idea, right? If you know anything about what an oni is, it's like a demon or a devil. I usually think of oni as big and monstrous, which is not how I think of sexy vampires. Anyway, kanji meanings can be very versatile, so when we have this kanji in kyuketsuki, it certainly doesn't have nearly the same vibe as the traditional oni. By the way, we've talked a little bit about kanji radicals, but this specific kanji for ki in kyuketsuki is itself a radical. right? Some radicals can be kanji, and some kanji can be radicals. Sometimes you build a kanji out of smaller radicals, and sometimes the radical itself is a kanji. This particular kanji slash radical shows up in a lot of words for supernatural things, like magic, monsters, ghosts, things like that. Some example words that happen to contain this supernatural stuff radical. Here's maho, a witch, just like my DOGtober witch hat. You can see the little oni radical in there, right? Manager-sama, would you circle it for me so that we can all see it clearly? Yep, there it is. Building kanji out of smaller radicals is really important, and it's also one of the ways that you can search a Japanese dictionary. I'll actually do a video at some point just showing you how to use a Japanese dictionary because it can be a really confusing process. Okay, another one is tamashi, which is spirit or soul. And again, you can see that same radical right in there. It's just to the right. This next word is miryoku. This is a word that means charming or fascinating. Sure, that could be innocent. Something that fascinates you could be just like a hobby, a pretty person, a sexy vampire, or maybe like the grand splendor of nature. But to be charmed can absolutely also imply something magical or mystical, right? Literally a charm spell. Anyway, let's go back to our example sentence. Next is ga. We know this little guy, right? It's our subject marker. Now, I've said this before, but determining where we should use wa in a sentence versus where we should use ga in a sentence can sometimes be mega complicated and headache-inducing. Are there grammatical rules that govern wa versus ga? Yeah, absolutely, certainly. The problem is there are so many of those rules. I have entire textbooks on my bookshelf that are nothing but when to use ga and when to use wa, and all of those little rules and minutiae in the language that govern when to use which one. Here's just one of those rules for ga/wa. If the verb in the sentence is a verb of existence, for example, imasu, the verb that we're using here, then the associated particle will be ga. So if you're talking about something exists, it's usually going to be something like ga imasu. It'll use that ga particle. We're going to talk more about that in a few moments, but first, let me introduce you to this extremely important verb, imasu. As I just alluded to just now, imasu is a verb of existence. Our easiest definition is going to be there is. So that ought to give us this definition for the sentence. There is a vampire outside. Soto ni kyuketsuki ga imasu. I also want to provide basic conjugations for imasu, so here they are. The base verb is iru. That's the plain present. Polite present is imasu. Plain past is ita. And polite past is imashita. There's actually a kanji for iru, but it is not used very often. Like when I'm translating, I almost never see it. That's probably because this is such a very common verb that it just makes more sense to write it in hiragana so that people who don't know the kanji will still be able to use the verb, because it's so important that like even little children need to be able to use it, and maybe they haven't learned all of their kanji yet, right? Anyway, I'm going to provide you with that kanji so that you see it, but again, you almost never use it. So here it is, iru, to be, or there is. Wait a second. Hang on though. Are you a bit confused? Haven't we learned des? And didn't I define des as the copula, which is like a verb that means to be? Well, then, what's this imasu verb? How can both des and imasu both mean is? I've tried to be very careful thus far in my lessons with how I define des. I've said that it's the copula. I've kind of said that sort of over and over and over. But let's really hammer down now and truly define what that really means. When we compare how des is used with how imasu is used, we're going to get a better understanding of what a copula is. let's take a look at these two sentences. Our sentence at the top here is Oni wa bakemono desu. And we understand what that means. It's our basic X, Y sentence. And that kind of sentence takes two things, here Oni and bakemono, and it says they are the same thing. Our second sentence is Kyoshitsu ni Oni ga imasu. Kyoshitsu means classroom, and we've already seen that ga imasu means there is. So a very literal interpretation of this sentence would be something like, there is an Oni in the classroom. The important thing that I hope that you're seeing right off the bat is that in the second sentence, we are not equating two things. Yes, there are two elements in the sentence, but it's not saying that an Oni is something. It's saying that an Oni is somewhere. It's saying an Oni exists somewhere. So it's not equative. It's a verb of existence. This is the basic difference between the use of des as a copula, a word that equates two things, versus the use of imasu, which is a verb of existence. Imasu can be thought of as there exists. So, here's another example of an imasu sentence. Kuroneko ga imasu. Very simple sentence, right? Kuroneko ga imasu. Kuroneko means black cat. Imasu means to exist. So if we were going to translate this sentence very, very literally, we get the meaning, a black cat exists. But then, of course, a black cat exists, right? That sentence doesn't really make any sense. Obviously, a black cat exists, but we can kind of reason that that's not exactly the meaning of the sentence. Kuroneko ga imasu. If you were going to guess the meaning of the sentence kuroneko ga imasu, what might you think it means? I have a black cat. We need to be a little bit less literal when we're thinking about the meaning of imasu. Because while imasu is a verb of existence, it sounds weird for us in English to translate it over and over and over as it exists. Which is why in my original sentence, soto ni kyuketsuki ga imasu, I provided a definition of there is a vampire outside rather than a vampire exists outside. Because we also have this question of scale that I brought up before. If we take it for granted that vampires are real, then the sentence, a vampire exists outside, in English is very different from, there's a vampire outside, right? Like, of course there's a vampire outside somewhere. And that's why I've said that Japanese is a context language, while English is a content language. In English, we tend to use our sentences and our language in a very literal way. We say what we mean. And usually our sentences can be interpreted very literally. Not so in Japanese. For Japanese, soto ni kyuketsuki ga imasu could imply either I am currently looking outside and I see a vampire and it is outside right now. Or it could imply at some possible hypothetical outdoor location in this universe, there is a vampire that is outside. We need context clues in order to figure out which meaning that we really mean in any given case. Actually, I'll just tell you, as a translator, that's maybe the hardest part of my job, is that oftentimes I don't have the benefit of being able to see what's meant by the author, because I don't get to sit down and talk with them, and I don't get clarification from them on what their meaning is. So all I can do is look at the words on the page and go, did they mean that they're seeing a vampire outside right now? Or did they mean that vampires exist? Right? Two totally different things, and if you translate it wrong, your meaning is totally off base. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's get back on track, okay? Ga and wa. I promised that we would get back to this point, so on the subject of ga and wa, I'm going to give you another really quick pair of sentences, and I want you to look at them and think about them, okay? So our first sentence is, akuma wa kowai desu, and our second sentence is, kowai akuma ga imasu. The first one means, demons are scary. Like, remember that Japanese doesn't really have plural, so this could be a demon is scary, and it could just as easily be demons are scary. And then same thing with the second sentence. The meaning of the sentence is there is a scary demon, or again, it could just as easily be there are scary demons. As I've said before, you can see that these two sentences are fundamentally different. In the first case, you're equating two things. You're saying demon equals scary. But in the second case, there's only one thing. It's a scary demon, and it exists. Now, this isn't going to work in every case. Not at all. But loosely, when we're thinking about wa and ga, we can think about it like this. In a sentence with wa, the most important part of the sentence is what comes before the wa. In a sentence with ga, the most important part of the sentence is what comes after ga. So, in our first sentence, what's scary? Demons. Demons are scary. The most important part of the sentence is demons, because if not for the existence of demons, we would have nothing to call scary. In our second sentence, the most important thing is the verb. It's imas. Why? Because the thing that's shocking isn't that a demon is scary, it's that a demon exists, right? It just so happens that that demon is scary, but what's shocking is it exists. And so the emphasis is on imas, and therefore it's taking ga as the particle. I hope that kind of makes sense. For this reason, I kind of like to translate wa in my mind as the basic phrase, as for. Akuma wa kowai desu. As for demons, they are scary. Contrast this with ga, which you can kind of ignore entirely in translation, and it's not going to change the meaning at all. Scary demon is. A scary demon exists. Emphasis on exists. Oh my gosh, it's real. A scary demon does exist. It's the fact that it does exist that surprises us, and therefore we use ga. Now, we've talked a lot about imas thus far, but there's another verb that I also want to introduce, and it's also really important. And I think a lot of new Japanese learners really find it really fascinating, but also really confusing. I know that I did. Anyway, let's make a new sentence, okay? Soto ni fushigi na ki ga arimasu. There is a strange tree outside. I'm not really going to go through this piece by piece. We already know the very basic bones of this sentence. Outside, soto ni. Fushigi means like weird or strange or mysterious. Ki means tree. Don't get it confused with the ki from Kyuketsuki. Totally different kanji, totally different concept. Ki in this case means tree, and we see the kanji for tree here. So the meaning is outside there is a strange tree. But this is a different verb, isn't it? Arimasu. Let's look at our two examples side by side for a moment. So, in our first sentence, soto ni kyuketsuki ga imasu. In our second sentence, soto ni fushigi na ki ga arimasu. There's imasu and there's arimasu. And they both mean there is. Why is that? All right, I want you to figure it out on your own. That's my goal here. My goal is for you to figure out the meaning. So let me provide you a few more examples, and I want to see if you can spot the difference before I tell you. So here's our first example. Inu ga imasu. There is a dog. And hone ga arimasu. There is a bone. Here's another example. Gakusei ga imasu. There is a student. And tsukie ga arimasu. There is a desk. Another example. Sakana ga imasu. There is a fish. And sushi ga arimasu. There is sushi. Do you see it? Have you spotted the difference between imasu and arimasu? Imasu is used for living things, while arimasu is used for objects. Okay, point taken. You're right. The line between an imas noun and an arimas noun is not as simple as living versus non-living. Heck, technically a vampire is not a living thing, right? A vampire is, by definition, a dead thing. So, we absolutely use imas when we're talking about a vampire, and we absolutely use arimas when we're talking about a tree. Therefore, I think we need to amend my definition just slightly. The basic difference between imas and arimas is that we're going to use imas for things that are able to move on their own. They have autonomy, they're animate. And we're going to use arimas for objects and things that do not get up and move around on their own. We could have all types of intellectual debates about what falls into which category, right? What about a robot? Well, typically, robots on a factory line are usually arimas, while ambulatory robots that resemble humans are usually imas. What about a corpse? Dead bodies are usually arimas, and zombies are usually imas. What happens if a mogwai eats food while on an airplane and it crosses over a time zone, so it's technically not midnight when it starts eating, but then it becomes midnight as it's still chewing? I don't know. But the point is that imas is for animate things and arimas is for inanimate things. Also, here's the conjugation chart for arimas, right? So the dictionary form will be aru, and then the polite present will be arimas. Plain past is atta, and polite past is arimashita. I know this is a bit of a confusing concept, and I can just about guarantee that if you're practicing speaking Japanese with people, you're sometimes going to say arimas when you really mean imas. You're sometimes going to say imas when you really mean arimas. And I can furthermore promise you that if you accidentally use arimas when talking about a person, it is definitely not going to cause that person to drop dead on the spot. The important thing is practice. Learn from your mistakes. Keep trying. Don't give up. Challenge yourself. I promise you it's all going to be okay. And know that I'm proud of you, every one of you, every single day. I have an announcement. As a special treat for the month of DOGtober, all quizzes are canceled. Yay! Unless you were a student like me. I would hear my sensei say that she had decided to cancel the quiz, and I'd be like, "Aw, but I studied." Or sometimes worse, "Aw, but I really needed to bring my grade point average up." I was such a nerdy student. Anyway, since it's the spookiest time of the year, instead of doing quizzes this month, I'm instead going to use this space just to talk about things that I like and teach you some neat words that I enjoy. For this week, I'm going to talk about my favorite monsters in Japanese mythology. Mythology doesn't seem like the right term for monsters, does it? I guess it is, though. Mythology? Supernatural lore? Surely there's a better term for the pantheon of Japanese monstery thingies. Anyway, we've already discussed Kyuketsuki, vampires, and you know that I love them so much. I used to play quite a bit of the TTRPG Vampire the Masquerade, so I conceptually understand that the idea is that there are like different families of vampires and they break down in different ways. But to my mind, all vampires sort of get classified as either beautifully manipulative or savagely bestial. I'll literally let you guess which type is my favorite. Next, let's talk about ghosties. In Japanese, we have a couple different words for ghosts, but probably the most widely used one is yure. These are your traditional see-through type ghosts. The kanji themselves mean something like a faint or dim spirit. I love ghost stories, and probably Japanese ghost stories most of all. If you're so inclined, seek out the movie Kaidan. It's a very traditional take on the Japanese ghost story, a ghost with a vendetta. Handy little thing just about ghosts in Japanese, they don't have feet. That's how you can tell that someone is a ghost. If you're interacting with someone and you go, "Huh, I wonder if they're a ghost or not. Look down and see if they have feet. If they don't have feet, that's a ghost. They might eat you or crawl out of your TV or go ah. I don't know. Anyway, next is kappa. This is one of the most recognizable and quintessentially Japanese monsters, right? It's the kappa. It's traditionally a bipedal turtle with some I can't say this word. It's a hard word. Students, the word anthropomorphic. I got it! Yay! Anyway, it's traditionally a bipedal turtle with some anthropomorphic features that have like a divot or a lily pad structure in their heads where they store water. They are obsequiously polite. Oh, that word I can say. Great. They are obsequiously polite, so kappa can be defeated by bowing at them. They're going to be compelled to bow back, and then their water falls on the ground, making them flustered. I used to live in Uji, which is near Kyoto, and actually near my house in Uji, there was a stream, and it had a statue of a kappa with like no adornment or anything, right? There was no sign that was like, this is a statue of a kappa. It was just a statue, like half covered in reeds down in this little like ditch near my house. But the first time that I saw it, I swear I thought it was a real kappa, and I literally just about jumped out of my skin. I genuinely wonder if maybe they put that statue there, like, because they knew that a lot of foreigners came to stay nearby and they wanted to scare us or something. I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe that statue had just been there forever, and maybe at some point there was a sign that said, this is a statue of a kappa, and it got destroyed or lost or something. The point is, I got scared. It was funny. Everyone laughed. Anyway, next, kitsune. Huh. What are foxes doing on a list of monsters? Foxes are just cute little guys. Well, sure. But in Japanese, foxes are also trickster demons. You know how all children's stories are also kind of like lessons on how you ought to live your life? Well, in Japanese folklore, that's the word that I was looking for before. Anyway, in Japanese folklore, kitsune are able to possess people by crawling into their bodies through their fingernails. So kiddos are told like bedtime stories about foxes crawling into their fingernails so that they'll take better care of their nails and not let them get all gross and stuff. Take care of your nails or a foxo will possess you. One of my favorite Japanese horror stories that I've ever read involved a man getting turned into a fox, living out his entire whole fox life with his new fox wife and his new fox children under the floorboards of his own house, and like watching the lives of the people above go on and on without him because he was now a fox and he was married to this fox lady. And then at the end of his fox life, he passed away. And then suddenly he awoke to realize that no time had passed. He was still a human. But the horror of the story, he missed his fox family. It's so sad. All right, next is Tsukumogami. These are literally tool spirits. At some point, I want to do a whole video just about religion in Japan, but here's the 10-cent tour, okay? Japan has two predominant religions. There's Shinto and there's Buddhism. This is extremely reductive, but let's just say for the case of ease that Shinto is for living celebrations like births and weddings, while Buddhism is for dying celebrations like funerals. Well, one of the things that's very important in Shinto are kami. Kami are spirits that reside in all things. They even reside in objects like tools. Nope. No. I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into that argument. Anyway, you might know these guys from like yokai stories. There's like the umbrella monster, the Kasa Obake, right? That I'm showing here. There are also things like possessed sandals, bakezori, possessed futon mattresses, boroborotom, and my personal favorite, a possessed lantern called Buddha Buddha. Tanuki. I can't with these guys. I can't. What the heck is up with your testicles? Ew, ew, ew. Gross. Moving on. I guess we should talk about Tengu as well, right? I'm I'm almost hesitant to put Tengu on a list of monsters because to my mind, they're more like a mythological race of beings rather than monsters exactly. Tengu are important figures in both Shinto and Buddhist folklore. They're usually tricksters and they enjoy conning people. They're basically like orange faced hucksters who try to swindle people out of their hard earned money through lies and deceit. However, Tengu aren't always bad guys. In fact, there's this book that I absolutely love called Torikayabaya Monogatari. Now, I could easily fall down a rabbit hole with this book because, well, I wrote a whole thesis on it, but very briefly, it's a book about a pair of siblings. It's a boy and a girl, and they sort of swap places. She lives as a boy, he lives as a girl, and it causes them all kinds of problems. Mostly because they actually have no agency and never really choose to transition or anything. That's a whole different argument. Anyway, the point is that at the end of the story, a Tengu shows up out of nowhere. Like, there's never been any allusion to this happening in the story. Pretty much nothing, like, particularly supernatural has happened in the story. It's basically just been the story of this boy who lives as a girl and the story of this girl who lives as a boy. And it's been relatively normal, but then just at the end, out of nowhere, Tengu shows up and he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Somebody made you live as a boy and somebody made you live as a girl? That's not cool. Here, let me fix that for you. And then the Tengu magically sets all of their problems right and helps them be just like who they were meant to be all along. I refuse to take a political stance other than to say this. Just let people be who they say they are. It's no one's right to define another person's gender other than that person themselves. Basically, Puppy-Sensei says trans rights, always. Anyway, that's enough monster talk for today. Are you as excited as I am for spooky season? I love it so much. Are you looking forward to any upcoming horror movies? Smile 2 is coming out in a few weeks. That's probably the scary movie that I'm most excited for this season. The first Smile movie messed me up, and it made it so that I could barely sleep for like 2 days. And yet, I still love scary movies. I still love things that terrify me. Maybe that's something very fundamental about learning how to be a person, right? It's all about challenging ourselves, pushing ourselves. I think that's really very important. When there's something that you're scared of, that's also an opportunity for us to do something bold and learn something new about our limits and our boundaries. That's how I felt when I started this channel. I was so scared to put myself out there, and I didn't really believe that anyone would want to hear my ideas or learn lessons from me. But y'all have shown me that I have something interesting to contribute. Thank you so much for all your support and your compassion. Anyway, that's all from me today. I've been Excess. Lead with love. See you later. Mata ne!